Who's in charge right now? I mean, this is a fair question, given the events we have seen over the last 48 hours coming to us out of Afghanistan. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Trish Regan Show. I am Trish, and I am just astonished and disgusted with all that we have seen. The lack of planning, the total ineptitude of this administration, led by none other than Joe Biden, if he's doing any of the leading, along with this Anthony Blinken, Jake Sullivan, you name it, we have problems. Kamala Harris is trying to, walk away. Of course, it's really not the brightest thing in the world to go to Saigon, to go to Vietnam, right? After we just saw the images of the Americans having to be rescued out of Afghanistan from a helicopter on the top of the roof of the embassy. Similar to, of course, what we saw back in Vietnam. Anyway, the problem here is the administration came out, Joe Biden, the president himself, came out and said, any American that wants to leave Afghanistan, we're going to make sure that we get you out. And then within 24 hours, less than 24 hours of that statement, we saw that the U.S. Embassy in Afghanistan was telling Americans not to go to the airport. It was too dangerous not to go to the airport gates. Too dangerous. It's too dangerous because you have the Taliban running things. Joe Biden is looking to the Taliban to show some mercy on Americans. Just think about that for a second. Okay, think about what he said, that he's hoping the Taliban will be good to Americans. I mean, I'm sorry, buddy, you can't be hoping or thinking that the Taliban's going to show you any mercy, for goodness sakes. Meanwhile, you've got an organization that was connected to Al-Qaeda that's now running the security in the streets of Kabul. So we're not in a good position here. Meanwhile, you want to talk about not being in a good position. We just gave up $1 trillion worth of rare earth minerals that they have in Afghanistan that we actually need, especially if Biden really wants this green energy thing. We're giving it up to China. I got more on that story coming up. But first, I want to just give you a quick word from one of our wonderful sponsors. You've heard me go on and on about inflation, how concerned I am about it. And unfortunately, I've been quite right. I've been pounding the table for about a year. And I want to make sure that everybody's protected, right? That your investments are protected. And one of the ways that you do that is through a diversified portfolio. And you hedge what's going on in terms of inflation. One of the best hedges out there. There's a few of them. I like overall being invested in this market, given this inflation. You want to have assets in the market. I think real estate is another really excellent space to be in. But the other one that has just, shown over time, thousands of years, that it really is the one sort of constant, that's gold. And so you ought to be thinking about having gold as part of your portfolio. And there's many ways to do it. I mean, you can buy the gold bars, you can have gold IRAs, you can invest in a gold fund, and you should be looking at all of it. And when you do, call my friends at Legacy Precious Metals, because Legacy Precious Metals, one of the sponsors of this program, they can make sure that you are looking and getting the very best gold investments for you at this time. I mean, everybody has different needs. Everybody has different plans for retirement. You need to work with a specialist to help make sure that you're doing sort of the right things and following the right steps. And when you do, I want you to call them at 866-589-0560. You see the number on the bottom of the screen there. Legacy Precious Metals. LegacyPMInvestments.com is their website. LegacyPMInvestments.com. Again, the number is 866-589-0560. But getting back to the insanity of what we're seeing right now in terms of the $1 trillion I just told you about that we're leaving for China. I mean, come on. Again, utter stupidity. I mean, you can say that they weren't planning this well, etc., but just what about the stupidity of walking away from all those rare earth metals and minerals, right, in the ground, which, by the way, you need if you're going to have this whole green energy revolution thing, Joe Biden, unless, of course, you really do want to leave it all up to China and leave everything for China. I mean, I've said all along, this whole electronic vehicle thing, he's come out and said that he wants the majority of cars within the next several years, right, to be electronic vehicles, which is all, fine and grand and dandy, except that there are other environmental hazards that you have to consider. It's not just oil that's an issue. By the way, the guy's going to OPEC saying, hey, can you please put more supply on the market because oil prices are going up so much? Unbelievable. You have your own oil supply here. And if you really want green energy and you want electronic vehicles, and you're going to need lithium for the lithium batteries. You ought to be focused on the battery industry here in the US instead of still relying on China. But no, you want to rely on China. Well, guess what? The source of lithium, the biggest in the world, that's all over there in Afghanistan. Okay, it was discovered several years ago. All of these natural rare earth minerals, specifically lithium. So it's not just a place that has poppy, right? They actually have something that we might want. And yet we walk away from it and we're going to leave it for China. Already the Taliban has come out and expressed interest in China helping them financially. I mean, financially, it's going to be a total disaster, right? It already is. They're going to experience mass inflation, hyperinflation. They have no liquidity, right? Because nobody's going to want to do any business with them, except, of course, maybe China. China, which will go and, lend money to anyone, effectively, any third world nation with minerals or other commodities that China wants and China needs. And China has a whole, very elaborate way of doing this. They come up with a really nifty plan to give them all this money for investment, something that, what exactly is the Taliban going to invest in? Who knows? That one can anticipate it's not going to be good, but they're going to get the blank check from China. And China says, yeah, we'll give you this. And then if you don't actually pay your debt on time, then guess what? We get to go in and take over that lithium mine that we helped you build. So this is the way it works. And we are giving all of this to China. None of it makes any sense. I realize, I'm not a big believer in meddling in everybody else's business. I mean, granted, the place is a total disaster, which a bunch of barbaric thugs, I'm sorry, but as someone who actually does care about women and how they're treated, I can never get, comfortable with what has just happened. I will never get comfortable with what just went down. I will never get comfortable with the fact that all these so-called feminists on the left, the extremists on the left, are like, okay with this, Ilhan Omar included. All right. But nonetheless, I don't believe that we need to necessarily be there screwing things up for all these other places, right? It makes sense to get out and strategically refocus on where you need to be. But in terms of that strategic refocusing, the country has $1 trillion worth of rare earth metals. And now you're going to just leave it for China. I mean, it really doesn't. It doesn't make a lot of sense. But then again, this administration doesn't make a lot of sense. You know what? People are starting to realize that. I mean, even the media is realizing that. Even like CNN is somewhat disenchanted, shall we say, with him. And of course, because, he's lying. He's lying. I mean, that's what we saw over the weekend, saying any American can leave. Turns out they can't. We're going to get you out. Turns out you can't. So he's lying. There was a call that they sent a readout with of a sort of a discussion, a phone call with the president of France. It was the president of the U.S., Joe Biden, and the president of France. And they're talking. And apparently the president of France says, this is a humanitarian disaster. We just can't leave people like this. It's not the right thing to do. And so what did the White House do? They struck that whole part right from the conversation when they released it. Well, the Guardian then came out with a story saying, hey, you know what? France has a totally different recount of this conversation. And here's what Macron said. And so the White House won't even tell you that. They are trying to cover up everything. And what's sad is that the journalists are leaving now. They've all gotten out, most of them. And so what are we going to be left with? How are we going to really get the truth? It's going to be far easier for the Taliban and also for this administration to kind of tell reporters what they think the reporters want to hear. And I think reporters are wising up to that. They're not okay with that. And granted, I mean, they could go even further. Some of them are reluctant to do so, in part because, hey, they helped get the guy elected. Let's be very, very clear, right? They had their biases. Meanwhile, you look at the polling data that's coming out, and Americans, they don't actually think that Biden is calling any of the shots. A Rasmussen poll now says that 51% of Americans believe that he's not actually, running things behind the scenes. 10%, they're not sure. So 61% of the country doesn't really believe that the president is in charge or is at least skeptical of it. I mean, that's kind of nuts. I would just say that in some ways, Americans, I guess they're giving him more credit than he deserves because they think he's smarter maybe than that. I don't know. I mean, the reality is he's not a bright guy. He's surrounded by a bunch of idiots and they're making really dumb choices and dumb decisions. And they think they've got carte blanche to do whatever they want to do, right? Because, he is effectively the Messiah after Donald Trump. I'm sorry. You know what? We didn't see this in Syria. When we got out of Syria, did you see what we're seeing now? No, you didn't. Because, by the way, the Trump administration did leave over 900 military troops in Syria, even though we were getting out, right? Apparently, the generals said to Joe Biden, and this has now been extensively reported on, hey, you ought to leave 2,500 military troops there because otherwise you're going to endanger all of these people, including so many Americans. But Joe Biden wouldn't have it. He wanted everybody out. I mean, this is beyond I think what anybody could have possibly, I mean, I could have anticipated. I've told you everything. I think he's an absolute train wreck, and I've warned you. I saw it certainly on the economic front. I didn't realize he was such an idiot in terms of the foreign policy front, but economically speaking, that's a whole other can of worms. And, we've talked about that a lot. And I think you need to be quite prepared for the challenges that this country will face a la 1970s, but worse, because he's deliberately going out there and creating this kind of havoc in the economy, trying to do things like wealth transfers, trying to shut down our Keystone Pipeline, right? That's him, while simultaneously going to OPEC and saying, hey, can you guys maybe supply a little bit more? It's very mind-boggling, but the reality is we need to change it. We need to have somebody better there. And that's partly what's behind this impeachment thing now, right? Marjorie Taylor Greene, the very conservative member of Congress, is now filing for articles of impeachment against the president. You also have Lindsey Graham, the senator, saying that he would consider impeaching this president if any American dies as a result of what's happening there in Afghanistan. The question is it, and I'm just going to be, look, personally, yes, I think he should be impeached. I think he should be gone. I think he should resign. I mean, then of course we just get stuck with Kamala. So think about that. Think through it carefully, because you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. But nonetheless, legally speaking, is it possible, given that, given that he's now president, can you just go in and impeach him? I think you'd have to figure out whether or not you could invoke, say, the 25th Amendment, because he's just not all there. He's got health challenges. I think that's going to be extraordinarily hard to prove out. The other reality here, and I hate to be a Debbie Downer for those that really want him gone, I mean, I think part of it's going to come up on all of us as Americans to really do our duty and get to the polls and to make sure we spread the word so that we get somebody else in there in 24. Also, a new crew in charge in 22. But, legally speaking, can they actually move forward on this? I think it would be really challenging unless you can prove that he's completely incapacitated and in bad health, or if you could somehow prove that there was some very malfactors that went into this decision making. Otherwise, he's the commander in chief, right? So he kind of gets to do, whether we like it or not. Sadly, this is why it's so important. Who actually becomes president gets to do what he wants to do, and this is the price that we are paying, and our nation will continue to pay, and Afghanis will pay. And, I'm going to talk to you a little bit tomorrow about the rise of terror, because that's actually happening right now in Afghanistan as well. There's a new terror network that has ties to Al-Qaeda that's sort of replacing Al-Qaeda, and it has prominence now with the Taliban. The Taliban has allowed it to exist and will allow it to exist, similar to Al-Qaeda. And so we need, as Americans, to think about that as well. And look, that's on Joe Biden. It's on him. He really screwed up in a massive way, and history will not forget this. Just a quick reminder to go to trishintel.com. We have the story, by the way, on Afghanistan there with the rare metals. You might be interested in reading that full version. We also have the story on Marjorie Taylor Greene, as well as Lindsey Graham, and the sort of effort, that this groundswell that you're seeing to impeach President Biden right now. So check out those stories on trishintel.com. Also, you can check out the store, the Trish Regan store there. It's on the website at trishintel.com. You can help support the show there. You've got to sign up for my newsletter. Please make sure that you sign up for the newsletter because it's really important. We stay in touch, that we have a direct connection. I've told you before, a lot of people in the White House don't want me saying what I am saying, but I'm going to continue to say it because it is that important right now. And we've got to talk a little bit about the terror organization that is starting in Afghanistan as a result of this chaos. That will be on the show tomorrow. I will be right back here with you, hurricane or no hurricane in the Northeast. Trish Regan is here, as always, for you. TrishIntel.com. Go to the website, and I'll see you tomorrow.